All right, let's get started, guys. So thank everyone for joining us. My name is Michael Marquides with Holistic Analytics. I'm joined here with my colleague, Tasman Murray. Special thank you to the Melbourne Energy Network for us. This is a webinar from Holistic Analytics covering behavioral customer analytics through the lens of the electric utility retailer here in Australia. Real quick agenda. We're going to start by going over a brief introduction of the current state of the power utility sector, discuss a little bit about the introduction to behavioral analytics, take a brief Q&A after that part, and then move on to some more examples that we can share about the difference between behavioral customer analytics and some of the other alternatives historically, and then talk about case studies within the electric utility space. When we look at data analytics for interpretation of what we can do to improve top line and bottom line performance in business, it's important to always focus on the concept of test and learn. So behavior analytics is effectively ensuring that we're capturing, valuing, optimizing, and then changing the performance of the business according to the actual behavior of the clients versus claimed data or any other type of metrics such as demographic or psychographic or other metrics that don't really capture the true heart of the behavior of your client. So that's the heart of behavioral customer analytics. When we think about the power utility sector, when we think about some of the trends, I think everyone here has some experience obviously in the sector, so this is nothing new, but I think it's important and imperative to talk about now as we come out of the crisis. Clean energy has been with us for a number of years, whether it's solar energy on your roof or whether it's renewable generation or so on and so forth. This has a very big social impact and a social understanding, but also an engineering impact and engineering understanding when we think about the influence obviously on how the grid is balanced. Going forward, this is quite a substantial challenge for grid operators here in Australia and around the world. The digital utility as a mega trend, it could be defined really. You could also just say the confluence of these technologies is a mega trend. And what we mean by that is when you look at IoT and AI and cloud and so on and so forth, these technologies have been various stages of maturity over the last 20 years. Because of the nature of the regulatory business of utilities, effectively we're talking about those technologies providing incremental change to benefit the current way that a utility is effectively run. So the business model, so to say. So I think it is important to think about that the capability of these technologies and how they can be used together to provide new value is always undergoing change, and there's a number of new business models and new competitors entering the Australian energy sector space. And we'll get on a little bit about in this presentation a little bit about how that is maybe influenced from the customer perspective. And finally, individualized customer service. So individualized customer service is at its heart a universal truth. So when we think about all of our behaviors over the past 10 years, some would argue maybe the past 20 years, our expectation of ease of use and accessibility and time, vision, so forth is going under a quite substantial change. Of course, it's no different than the utility experience. We expect, of course, the lights to always be on, and we expect everything to be work perfectly. And we expect, of course, to be able to access any information we want, ask any questions we want, and have those things given to us quite easily. So I think that is important. Really, the genesis of that is of course what this conversation tonight is about. It's about understanding how an electric utility retailer should be capitalizing and understanding on this kind of change in individualized customer service expectations. The future Australian consumer. So in the link here, and I put it here in the chat for the webinar, is a McKinsey story from I believe May 15th. The date is quite important. We're looking at understanding how the Australian consumers basically making purchasing decisions, how they're being that influences, of course, how they're being marketed, how they're being sold, and how they're being serviced through the pandemic. So the data is important. The data to date on this cited article tells us very clearly that a lot of people are converting over to having to use digital tools for obvious reasons to buy things. So we only have a look at medical, shopping, food, due to the timestamp there of available information, white goods and real estate and auto and utilities don't really necessarily have data points just yet, but we can assume, and I think we should assume, that the change in behavior is universal to the consumer, and a lot of it, those expectations, patterns, behaviors, tools, so forth, are going to be there to stay, and that's really the crux of what the linked survey is from McKinsey. So, and basically, that's what we say here as an electric utility retailer now in 2020, here in Australia and anywhere in the world. Behavioral customer analytics, meaning you have a system in place that is operationalized across your company that allows you to fully understand how to interact with your customers because of their behaviors, is foundational to you remaining or becoming and remaining an agile organization through the various stages of what is effectively an unknown new world as we come to the stages of recovery. That's it. Thank you, Taz.
Thanks, Michael. And obviously, even though we're telling this through the lens of electric utility retailers, the same rules basically hold for all industries. No matter what you're doing, where you are, the ability to learn more about your customer, the ability to take that information and push it out into another area or to create a new revenue stream or something else exists across almost every business line. A few of you would have seen this before. This is our analytics funnel that we talk about. Got marketing analytics at the top, which brings people into the funnel. We've got customer analytics. And then after people have purchased a product, a holistic analytics, where we're looking at the entire business and how everything actually leads back to customer satisfaction, more sales, greater profits. As we're talking about on the right there, customer analytics generally has the most automated tools and solution of any of these areas. I've yet to see any automated customer analytics tool that focuses on behavioral analytics. Almost every single one looks at demographics or segmenting people by age, race, gender, expected income, whatever the case is. Very few look at behavior. The reason for this is every website's set up differently. So trying to track somebody through one website compared to another website would require rebuilding the entire program. There's obviously a few ways to get around that, but that's the current challenge that exists, and that's why behavioral analytics is widely untouched. The beauty of behavioral analytics is you can get so much more out of a consumer and out of a targeted consumer than you could with a simple demographic target. The reason the entire market's looked at demographics historically is that's how media is bought. If you're buying media, you're looking at, I want to hit people between 30 and 45 who like sports. And so you'll be targeting things like AFL and this and that, but that doesn't tell you anything about how they're going to react with your product once they come through. And that's where you start to see these massive assumptions being made.
Yeah.
So when we try to understand our customer, there's a few things we go through here. The first thing is, who are they? This is basic information. What's their name? What's their age? Date of birth? Who else is in their home? Especially for an electricity retailer, are they living alone? Are they family? Are they renting? Do they own the home? What services do they use and prefer? Are they just using you for a single service? Do they also have solar panels they've purchased off you? Are they feeding back into the grid? What are they doing there? How often do they switch providers? This is a really big one that very few electric retail utilities actually do. Most of them don't actually look at when people are switching, although it costs them a heap of money not to actually consider that. The majority of answers you get if you ask somebody at an electric retailer, when somebody switches, it's when they move house. So then you have to understand what are the key figures you're looking at when somebody's going to move house. Is there a way to tell that they're going to do that? And how do you become front of mind when they're moving? How do you identify their brand loyalty for electricity? Again, most electric retailers will tell you that there is zero brand loyalty. Everyone's purchasing on price at the moment, which suggests they don't understand the customer fully and cannot offer them any value. And the final one is, what is their cost to serve? Again, if everything's set up properly, you'd think that should be a fairly simple thing to answer. The majority of retailers you talk to will have a flat rate for every customer, regardless of whether that customer comes through a call center, whether that customer goes through the website to do everything. they'll have the same cost to serve. So they won't have any idea of how different a customer is and whether or not they're valuable to their business. The general way these customers have been understood and marketed to before, as talked about before, demographic, geographic, and psychographic. Psychographics generally around your hobbies, so things like what kind of sports do they like, what kind of activities do they do. Geographic is where they live. This becomes a huge thing for a lot of retailers, obviously trying to target specific areas. And demographic, you've all seen and heard before. That's your age, your gender, your race, your income, all those bits and pieces. They're all the traditional ways that these groups are targeted and grouped. And they're useful, but they can be misleading if that's all you're using. Behavioral helps to tie a bunch of this together. And even though behavioral seeks to segment customers in a similar way that the other groups do, it's segmented based on something that's going to affect your business. If somebody's a 45-year-old white guy, it's not going to affect your business any more or less than if they're a 20-year-old Asian female. They could be using the exact same power output. They could be just as flaky or just as loyal. There's a range of things that could be affecting it there. But if you're looking at behavioral types, people generally don't change those too much. There's a whole field of psychology that talks about how malleable people are and how much they change. But you tend to find that most people's behavioral patterns remain relatively consistent. What makes behavioral different, as we were talking about there a little bit, and as Michael mentioned at the start, it's actual, not claimed or perceived. A lot of the research you'll do at the moment, you might do brand health research and they say, yeah, we prefer you 10 out of 10 all the time because they want to get brought back and get more paid research out of you. Whereas in fact, they may not be using you at all, which becomes an issue. With behavioral, you can find common drop-off points. So if you're using your form, if you're using your website, if somebody's trying to register with you, you can find where they're dropping off. This allows you to identify bottlenecks that if you weren't looking at the behaviors, you wouldn't be able to spot before, and you can do expensive research to try and get. With behavioral research or behavioral analytics, you can personalize services and offers in a useful way. You will be able to understand what's of value to those people and will be able to actually push that through for them. So you can create these separate segmented offers. And we're not talking full one-to-one personalization where everyone needs a special crafted doll for themselves. This is sorting it into groups that's useful for the business. This helps you reduce broad-based assumptions in the business. So, as we were saying before, this guy's a 45-year-old white male. He's definitely going to be our key customer. He may have a debt history longer than your arm. You may know nothing else about him. So making these assumptions straight off becomes costly for your company. The other beauty of behavioral is it helps you identify new product offerings. If you can see what people are looking at, if you can follow them onto other sites and see what they're doing there, you can start to identify really quickly, okay, people are really interested in wind power. Maybe if we create some wind generation, we can actually push that through to help them. Or it could be an entirely different area. You could have the people that are just really pro coal and gas, and you could offer them coal and gas power. Make a statement to them that that's what you're offering them, make them happy, and push that through that way. Sorry, I have to look around my screen to see my screen. You can also find better ways to market to people. By marketing people through behavior, a couple of things can happen there. Obviously, it can become harder to target them through traditional media, but from a retargeting perspective, it becomes a really valuable tool as you can look at collections of actions they take on your website before they're ready to purchase. So you can group factors and say, okay, everyone that's on the website will go through these 4 or 5 different stages, or out of these 20 steps, we'll do 4 or 5. Once they do, we can move them down and change how we're talking to them. So we start personalizing the messaging and start retargeting them a lot better. So obviously we've started singing the praises of this. If it's so good, why aren't people doing it? The first one, and this will sound scary or silly, is the internet is a scary place. The majority of companies you talk to don't combine their digital data with their offline data at all. It can become difficult for a lot of companies to do. Even if you're trying to use Google Analytics to do it, they tend to aggregate their data, so it limits what you can do there. It's been made difficult for a lot of companies to do this, and because they see it as more difficult than it actually is, they just don't do it, and so they're leaving money on the table by doing that. This ability to track customers to the nth degree throughout their journey, it's relatively new. Following somebody on a website, you can do now. You can follow them off the website, although that's probably going to disappear in the next year or so as third-party cookies are wiped out. But this ability to narrow down each step they're taking is relatively new, and most companies aren't across it. As we were saying before, companies generally don't consider this either. Their marketing plans, their media, it's not purchased historically around behavior. So it's something they don't see as something they're able to use. And if they don't understand how to use it, they're just not going to bother with it. As mentioned already, people think it's hard, nigh on impossible, so they don't bother. And the other piece is fear of failure in a business can be a stronger motivator than potential for success. It's a lot easier for a lot of companies to keep doing what they've always done, stay in their job, and just keep going, hoping everyone else does the same. If you are trying to do this, there's a few things you need to do to start with. The first is to collect your offline data. The second is to collect your CRM data. Third is your usage data. And to get that, you have to properly tag up your website, tag up any forms you're using, extract that digital data or push your offline data into the digital clouds. And finally, you need a centralized point where all this data can be combined and stored intelligently. And that's a really key point there. A lot of companies have sold in data lakes, cloud storage solutions for the last 10, 15 years and cost companies millions and millions of dollars with no value. They've brought all the data into one spot, but they've not done so intelligently. So before you start collecting all this data and putting it together, work out what you need to do with it and how you're going to do that. Once you've got that information, then you can absolutely centralize it in a way that you can use going forward. So that's a really quick overview of what behavioral analytics is. We'll talk through some of the benefits and some of the outputs from that next. But any questions on what we've covered so far?
I have just a quick question. For example, if I would like to add psychometric data to my analysis, how is the best way, or how companies capture this data?
A lot of psychometric data is generally captured through questions, tests, whatever else they have. It almost has to be attributed at an individual level. So obviously you get into a whole area here around personally identifiable PII data, personally identifiable information, but you need to get it at an individual level without somebody being able to identify it if they get bits and pieces of that random information. So whether you do through a survey or through face-to-face questioning, through what somebody's recorded on a phone call or anything else, you need to record that information at an individual level, or at the very least at an account level.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
No worries. No other questions in there?
I got a quick one, Taz. It's a bit of a wild guesstimate, I'm sure, but if we look at electric utility retailers, and if anyone else wants to please add to the comment, I'd be interested to know, we have experience with a few, but obviously not everyone. Is the issue more to do with the fact that they're maybe doing this segmentation in the demographic sense and therefore going down the wrong hole potentially, or they're not even maybe, let's say, that advanced just yet, do you think?
Some utilities have spent a lot of money on this. So companies like AGL have entire teams dedicated to doing segmentation and pieces like that. The majority of utilities still aren't even doing that much. The problem is a lot of them will have spent, we talked to one company, they spent $250,000 with a large consultancy who we won't name for a segmentation piece, and it got them 6 pieces of paper, literally 6 pages. There was a white paper, it had 4 segments on it. Those 4 segments were, from memory, loyal customer, a disloyal customer, a medium loyal customer, and a debt-prone customer, which you didn't need to pay $250,000 to somebody to tell you. But the issue was there was no way for them to tell exactly there was no way for them to work out which of those customers was which. So the information required to solve that problem, they didn't have. And I think that's one of the biggest issues for these companies at the moment. They just don't have the information they need in a sort they need in order to be able to solve those questions. Make sense?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Any other major questions in there?
Do you have those 6 pieces of paper? Can I have them?
Sell them on for $200,000? Bargain.
Something like that.
So thanks, Taz, for the presentation. So you're gonna provide your solution actually in the next slides, or?
not so much the solution, what you can do with it. So using behavioral analytics, the kind of solutions you can build.
Okay, so my question is now, so you had a couple of items in the last slide which tells actually a retailer, utility, or whatever, so that they collect data through offline data, CRM, usage data, property tagged up website, digital data, or whatever resources that they have. And then finally, we get to the last point, which would be that 6 pages of paper that you said. So imagine that, I imagine that most of the utilities have access to all of this data, but they don't know how to use that. So, so provided that, for example, I'm a utility, I gathered all of those data and give that to you up to the number 7. So what is the number 8 from you? I mean, so how you put together all of the data and provided a solution for me?
So the problem with most of the utilities we've worked with so far is they don't capture their data correctly at the moment. So if somebody calls the contact center, they won't necessarily record that call against a account number. They won't necessarily record against a customer.
Okay.
Their website, they don't start capturing whether or not that's the same customer that's been before.
Okay. So that means that actually you help them through all of those 1 to 7 data sources to capture that data properly, and then it's up to them to categorize and provide any sort of service to those customers that they have categorized to that.
So we generally do end-to-end with clients. So we work out what questions they're trying to solve, and then we'll go back and say, okay, here's the data at the moment. We can try and use this, create a proof of concept, but to make this better going forward, here's how you should capture your offline data. Here's how you need to set up your CRM data. Here's how you need to set up your usage data. Here's how you need to tag up your website. And once that's all extracted, here's the solution. But the next part of that isn't just here's a solution, here's how you can implement that solution yourself, which is where the majority of solutions fall down. So that 6-page white paper is just here's a solution. And a solution with no way for a business to implement it is absolutely useless. It's like a cake you can see, but you can't eat. It's just sitting there. It looks pretty, but it's going to give no value to you whatsoever. It's like showing a picture of a glass of water to a man that's dying of thirst.
Okay. And do you have so next question is, do you have a sort of consistent approach through all of these processes to the end, or it is an ad hoc solution for everyone based on the circumstances, based on this type of business that they have, type of software or IT platform that they are using, all sort of things?
Yeah, so the approach changes depending on if it's greenfield or brownfield. Naturally, the majority of utilities you're talking to are brownfield, so we have to unpick the problems they've made and then work out the solution from there. The majority of these data sources, we know what they need to look like, so we can say once it's here, this is how we can do this. But the issues before that is how do we need to rearrange the data you have in order to get to that point?
Yep.
And that's always going to be a bit ad hoc.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the solution is, and the work is ad hoc, but I think procedurally speaking, or on our methodology side, obviously we have a set series of steps and processes that we go through that are the same. So.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. It is customer specific. It is customer specific.
Yeah, and if you think about the value of behavioral analytics at its core, I think it has to somewhat, because we're trying to set up a construct that allows for the proper measurement against the company's customers with the company and how that relationship exists to a certain extent, right? So it has to be somewhat customized.
Yeah. And you also have to try and sort out a solution that business can use. So there's no point delivering a heavy AI solution to a company that's got no analysts whatsoever that can handle it. It'll be a bunch of series numbers, a couple of reports that they can't use, and it will never get touched. So at the front end and the back end, you need to make some changes per customer, but that process remains consistent.
Right. Okay.
Good question.
I also have a question.
Yes, right, go ahead, Alexa.
Yeah, cool. Alexa here. So, like, I don't know if you know about this, but you know, if you know about the attempts that I've seen here and there, where they want to get an app to the hand of the customer and incentivize them, you know, by kind of engaging with the app, sort of saving or something. So, what do you think the reason is for these kind of solutions not taking off? If you think they're not taking off, is it like privacy concern, or is it like people don't like apps, or this is something people can't think of kind of using apps for? Do you have any insight on that?
The biggest issue is there's not enough value prop for the customer at the moment. So every company wants to say, use our app, it'll be great for you. But they're thinking about how good it'll be for the business, not how good it'll be for the customer.
Right. So it's not just the customers don't have the right perception of the value. They actually, there's not much value for them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Right.
There's quite a few different solution types we talk about where, sorry. Quite a few solution types we talk about where it's a tech-led solution, it's not a customer-led solution. And that kind of solution is always going to fall over. So something like just a pure data lake solution for a company is a tech-led solution. It doesn't think about the end customer, what they're going to need, how they're going to use it. Creating an app and saying, this will be great for our company if we can get customers to use it, it's a tech-led solution. It's not saying to the customers, hey, what do you want? Here's how we can provide it to you. It's as a company saying to a customer, here's what we want, please use it. It completely misses that value prop in the middle. And sorry, Alexa, I just unmuted you there. I was getting some feedback, but feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sure, thanks. No, that makes sense. I didn't think of the third option. That makes sense. Yeah, it's always like not taking a human-centric design, as they call it. Yeah, that's interesting. Good insight.
So just jumping through again, obviously, as we were talking about there, what can we do with behavioral customer analytics? One of the key things is the right message at the right time. And to your point there, Alexa, the right message for the customer, not the right message for the business. You can obviously improve churn prediction and prevention, and you can improve overall profitability of your business. You can see if you're a water utility, you can see where leaks are. If you're an electricity utility, you can see where spikes and troughs are. And obviously with this demand-driven change coming through, that'll become more and more valuable. A couple of different things you can do with this is you can work out what the cost to attain a customer is. Most companies, if you stand on the outside of a company, you think, oh yeah, every company will know how much it costs to get a customer on board. Majority of retailer utilities I've talked to, majority of retailers, to be honest, have no idea what the cost to attain a customer is. They don't realize what the number of marketing touch points required are. They don't know what the full customer lifetime value is, so if it's worth the cost to attain them. Most of them don't know what discounting levels are required to offer to attain. So at the moment, you've got this kind of race to the bottom between retail utilities, where they're just trying to offer less and less and less. You have other services required. You don't know what other services are required to offer to attain a customer. You don't know what drove the uptake of new services. You don't know how they registered with the business a lot of the time. And you don't know if there's any further cost required to onboard them. So you may know I spent $1 million this quarter and I got 3,000 customers. You don't know how much it costs to attain each of those customers separately. How much waste did you have in there? How much fat you have in there? By looking at behavioral analytics, you can start to understand at what point did they cross that threshold where they're going to start spending more money with you, where they're going to sign on, where they're going to do exactly what you need them to, that you can stop spending money. You see this a lot in search. A lot of people will pay for branded search or direct search, and a lot of the time the customer will already know they're going to buy from that company. So they've typed in that company's name in Google, they've come up at the top, they've clicked on the thing at the top, which was an ad, and so now the company's had to pay money to get them in, even though they're already going to come straight to that company. So understanding where that is, especially depending on volume, can change a whole lot of the profitability equation for your business. Another cost here is the cost to serve, and we touched on this before. Most retail utilities don't understand what the actual cost to serve a customer is. They don't measure the amount of touch points they have with that customer. They don't measure the types of touch points they have. And by that, we mean, is it an online touch point? Have they come into a store? Have they made a call through a call center? Have there been any other ways they've contacted your business? Did they do it through Facebook, through something else? Where was a person required? Where was a person not required? The next thing they've had to look at for the cost to serve is the regularity of requests for discounts. So if you're not looking at how many times a customer's called you up asking for a discount, you've got no idea how much that customer is either going to cost you or is worth. And you would think that most retailers would have this covered. From what we've seen, the majority don't even keep this in their CRMs, which becomes a huge issue. Loyalty is obviously a huge factor in the cost to serve. If you have a customer that's loyal, and every utility will tell you that anyone that's over 70 is likely to stay with them forever, clearly not the case for all of them. But understanding the loyalty of a customer and what's required to maintain that loyalty can be really valuable. So if you've got a range of customers that have been with you for a few years, some competitors offering them a 45% discount, you give them a call beforehand and say, hey guys, we're going to take 15% off your price. It means you're still going to keep them. It becomes a lot cheaper for you to do, and you're not having to try and compete on those huge discounts once again. Likelihood to pay on time becomes a really valuable thing for retail utilities in the cost of service space, as is the likelihood to default. Having to have that extra money on hand becomes a huge cost. It doesn't seem like it should, but if you start adding up those dollars and cents that haven't been paid for a month or 2 months, the amount of extra value you can get out of them becomes enormous. So understanding those becomes really useful, and you need to kind of segment a customer up to understand those likelihoods. Once again, at the moment, most of that's done by age and potentially location, which are not very useful factors to tell you whether or not somebody's going to pay on time or default. Customer usage is a really valuable thing as well. Obviously, if you're an electric retailer, you want to understand how much energy they're going to use, what times they're using that energy, and what kind of peaks and troughs look like for them. Naturally, the ways you can do this is you can look at recording historical usage. You can capture this information through digital metering. You can utilize IoT devices across the network. As you talked about there, Alexa, you can look at the app usage details as well, website usage details, and you can record usage on other sites. So you can capture their electricity usage. You can also capture their uptake of your other services, other platforms, to understand if they're trying to get in touch with you, how much they're engaging with your business, and all of these little touch points you can use as measures of loyalty, measures of likelihood to churn, measures of retention, all these other things. So these become really, really useful things to capture, and obviously to help you understand what the value of that customer is. The cost to retain becomes even more of a challenge, especially for retailers at the moment. I think we talked to one retailer and they were claiming they lost 30% of their customers in the last 2 years, which is a huge amount. They had basically a monopoly position. Other companies came into the area and all they were able to do was compete on discounts. But they didn't know who to offer a discount to, how much to offer that discount of, because again, they didn't know how much that customer cost to serve, how much they were likely to pay, how much they were likely to default. They had no information on any of this. So a lot of the touch points you need to do, you need to know how often they need to be compensated. How often do you need to offer them a discount? How often are they going to come back asking for more? It's really useful to understand what level of discounting is required to keep them. So again, this company we used to work with, they would just offer anyone that called up the exact same discount. So you called up, you'd get a 35% discount. No matter whether you'd been in default for 3 months, whether or not you'd been the most loyal customer they've ever had, call up, 35% discount. There's no proactivity to it. It was all purely reactive and meant customers become really expensive to retain. And as we were talking about just before, really important to understand, is it worth the company keeping them? A lot of companies might think, yeah, I've got 1,000 customers, that's fantastic. But if 500 of those customers aren't paying and aren't paying on time, it's probably not going to be worth the time for that company to actually keep them and try and retain them. And the other piece to understand there is what's driving the change. So do you have a surge of people coming to you when a discount's being offered? If it is, you're competing purely on price. You're offering no other value to those customers. And as an electric retailer, that becomes a really, really challenging piece. It's a lot more difficult for an electric retailer to offer value in other ways. And I think that's where the major struggle's been for many of these companies. Another piece here is the sign up and churn out flags. So the majority of retail companies at the moment are purely reactive beasts. They don't take action until someone makes them take action. If they can be proactive, again, it becomes a lot cheaper for them and a lot more value for them. So from the sign up, churn out flag, what did their sign up journey look like? And if we can capture that, we might have an idea of what their churn out journey is going to look like as well. If we look to other customers who have churned out in the past and we have what their sign up look like, we can start to create these patterns across. So were they a conscientious person when they signed up, or did they just jump across when you offered a discount, sign up straight away? Did they look at the rest of the website? Did they start considering other bits and pieces? Did they look at whether you have a clean energy policy? What were their interests beforehand? Using this information, you can A, know if they're likely to churn, B, know what kind of actions they're taking, and you'll also be able to know at what point can you no longer affect their decision. If you have this, it becomes really powerful. If you can affect their decision in their first consideration phase, great. If you have to wait until the time they've called and say they want to cancel, it's majority of the time too late. So understanding the information becomes really, really valuable as a business. In terms of the sign up, a lot of that's around the CX piece, the customer experience piece. If you can understand what steps people are dropping out in the sign up process, you can work out very quickly if you have a bottleneck there. If it's becoming a problem for customers, if it is, it's going to mean it's getting a lot more difficult to get customers on board. So you've basically got them to the point where they're ready to join you, they're ready to buy what you've got, but you've made it too difficult for them to do. And if you're not following this process for them, you can't work that out. One of the other flags here, as we were talking about before, is when is customer planning to move? You can see potentially with people that have moved before, were they looking at your website before? Were they trying to find something on your website about the offers you have for people that are moving? Were they trying to Google it? Was it coming up with, these kind of people have been searching how to move electricity providers really quickly? And obviously that's a huge space for some aggregated companies at the moment. But as an electric utility, you have the opportunity potentially to get ahead of that game. If you've got flags that they're planning to move, and you can get this from some external information as well, then you can start getting ahead of that. You can get in their heads beforehand and make sure they bring you with you to their new house. One of the things that's useful for companies to understand is who's their most valuable customer or group of customers. And this captures everything we've talked about before already. What is their cost to serve? What's their lifetime value? What's their lifetime usage? What's their loyalty look like? What's their cost to retain? And how many different services are they going to use? A lot of retailers will talk about stickiness of a customer. If they've only got one service with them, they're less likely to be as sticky. If they have electricity, gas potentially, some states water as well, if they're using your solar panels, if they're using a few other products you're offering, then people often see this as a stickier, more loyal client, which can be measured and obviously can be used, as well as the extra revenue they're giving you by getting the uptick in those different services. As we talked about before, and this is really important, none of this has any value if you don't package it in a way the business can act on it. So when we've done this for a business before, we talked with their call center, we talked with their actual customer service reps and asked them what would be useful for them. So we created a segment that was just simple numbers. We created a churn risk that was simple numbers, and then we talked with their product offering team and built products around those number combinations. So if they were in the most highest performing segment and they had a low risk to churn, then obviously they were going to be a high value customer. So you could offer them the highest discount as you wanted to keep them going and keep them on. If, however, they were a medium value client but a high risk to churn, then maybe you'd offer them 5%, 6% discount rather than the full discount. Because it'd be nice to keep them on, but you know their value is not going to be huge and they're likely to ask you for another discount down the road. Everything you do in terms of analytics and building a solution, it has to be packaged and built in a way that the business can use. You have to be able to teach the business how to use it. They have to be able to run with it. If you don't, it's going to have a very expensive car with no engine. And you're probably not going to be able to work with that business again. So to bring this all together, we've got a use case here. Energy retailer had a range of questions they couldn't answer as a business. As we talked about, they didn't know the cost to serve a customer. They just had a flat rate there. They didn't know what services a customer connected when they called. So they didn't know if they had gas, if they had electricity, if they had water. They just get a call from a customer that had no idea who the actual customer was. They had no idea what could be done to reduce churn. They had no levers as a business apart from pricing. And even though they were spending millions each year, they had no idea what the effect of their marketing spend was. The last one seems like it should be a simple thing, but majority of companies, I'd say probably 70% in Australia, have no idea what the effect of their marketing spend is. They don't know which channels work, which channels don't. It's a bizarrely huge issue. So the solution we created here, we combined data across the different CRMs they had. We created a single customer ID across their services, rolled out that customer ID to any online interaction. So we were capturing the full customer interaction, both online and offline. Conducted churn modeling and segmentation, turned this modeling to simple numerical ratings the call center could then use, conducted marketing mix modeling to understand the impact of the marketing, and we connected external data to customer data to nullify dual listing addresses. In some states, not sure which states in particular, but I know in some states, you can choose the address of your house. If your house is on a corner, you can choose which street you're on. And obviously the utility retailer has a different address for you. So with those two issues, it become a big problem for retailers, and they're trying to deal with electricity, gas, water, whatever the case may be. So by connecting external data, such as Australia Post data, we're able to nullify the dual listing and understand exactly where customers were for each of the services. A couple of benefits came out of this. Obviously, they had reduced admin hours and time. Customer retention and value of customers started to increase, as they knew they were likely to pay on time. It allowed the business to create different levels of discounting and different offers, as we talked about just before. And it allowed the business to target and onboard high-value customers rather than those with a high churn risk. Obviously, to do that, we had to capture a bit of external data as well, which was captured through third-party cookies and other bits of information we used to enrich. As I mentioned already, going forward, that's going to become a more challenging prospect, but there will be ways around that. So we've kind of blown through that, hopefully reasonably quickly. Any major questions around those? No?
You blew them away, Taz.
No questions is never a good thing. That's fine. Any of you guys had any experience trying to do this kind of stuff yourself, or seen this happen in businesses you work with?
Just I raised one of my sort of concerns or questions or whatever I say around these issues. The thing is, the industry, the whole industry, I mean, the energy retail and also other part of the utility industry is facing a sort of credit crisis with customers at the moment. So many pieces of the data that you are getting from customers, the customers just let alone the privacy issues and all of the regulations around that, but customers usually are not happy to provide any sort of information to utilities and retail sector because usually they don't trust them. And so that's the thing that I have come across with that too many times, that most of the times that people have negative idea about the utility company that they are dealing with, and this actually makes everything more and more difficult for utilities to deal with customers. So if all of these processes create environment for the utility to create that trust with customer, I don't know how. I mean, it's just a wish that customer sort of feels that, so they are honest with them and they are providing discount because of this and this and this factor, So, and this mutual cooperation actually increases. So that would be great. That would be huge impact, because all of the time that I feel that utilities are pursuing this sort of solution to create this kind of trust with the customers. But unfortunately, that has not been successful across the industry. I don't know why, but yeah, this is. I just wanted to raise this question: that how you think that this kind of customer categorization would have interact with customers, because customers already are biased against this kind of privacy and issues with the utility, and then sometimes they might have negative impact on this trust that is already messed up, you know.
There's always a challenge on how you approach this with customers. The majority of this information a utility is already going to have. They're going to know how the customer is using their information, or how the customer is using their electricity. If a customer's on their website, they're tracking that anyway. If a customer signed up with them, they've had to give them a range of information. With all these bits and pieces, it allows the utility to actually become proactive rather than reactive. So the reason a lot of customers, I think, don't trust their utility is the utility offers them nothing until they call up and complain. Whereas with this kind of information, you know how valuable that customer is, you know how loyal they are, you can reward them ahead of time. And it's almost counterintuitive to how most businesses run, to offer a discount before someone asks. But if you do this, you can create this actual friendly almost bond with the customer. You can call them up and say, hey, you've been a great customer. We're going to discount your energy 5% for however long you're with us. And then if they're with you for another couple of years, you can call them up again and say, hey, thanks again for being with us so long. We're going to do this for you. The fact no other company is doing that in Australia at the moment creates this huge opportunity to get that customer success story working for you and actually win that back. The majority of people don't realize how much data they give away on a day-to-day basis. They don't realize that we could get almost every bit of information you need on a customer to answer these questions if you were willing to pay enough money. But just through using your website, through using a CRM and recording the calls they've had with your customer service, you can get the majority of this information. You can do this with, I 90% confidently say that any electricity retail business currently has the systems in place to capture all the information they need to do this.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we can say that most part of data is available. But yeah,
we're also kind of stuck in a bit of a reactive stage, right? Babak is another thing. Is like how do they break the cycle? There's a cycle of reactive behaviors. Yeah.
But finally, the customer should stick to the company because of that mutual trust. You know, so I've seen a lot of churn from customers that actually they got enough discount from the business, but the churn rate has not, the cause of the churn has not been actually money, has not been the fees. They simply right. Because they didn't like that utility, the retailer, because they sort of thought that, oh, so these guys are telling me lies or whatever, or they have sometimes, yeah, they are giving me discount, but most of the time they are overcharging me. And sometimes it's not even reason. The reason is not even money, so it's something else. So the vast majority of reasons around that, which is sometimes is just emotional. It is not realistic, but that's very complex. I don't know, but I felt that those customers are usually loyal, that they think that they can trust the business rather than actually they feel that, oh, I'm getting enough discount, I'm getting this or that, you know. So that has far more impact on the customer loyalty rather than as some other monetary issues. Anyway, yeah.
But all of that's a data problem as well. Like the customer is being mischarged because the data they have on their customer is incorrect. But
that's one of the issues. Yes.
But if you're tracking that customer's behavior, you can notice that they've checked out their bill 4 times in the last week, whereas normally they'd look at it once. So if you see that happening, you've got a chance then to reach out to the customer or to check the bill yourself, and then go back to the customer before they have a chance to call you and be like, hey, we noticed this mistake on your bill. So using behavioral analytics, you can actually build these flags out. So if a customer's checking their bill more often than they do, it creates a flag so one of your customer service reps goes in and checks their bill. Sees if it's higher than normal, see if there's any other issues in there.
Yeah, that's actually creates possibilities of too many solutions. Yeah.
And I think Alexa had a question in there.
Yeah, just a quick one, and if it's related. So that was a kind of a valid thing that Bobak was saying, and Tasman, you said there's great opportunity. So I want to know your hinge about this. Do you think the reason the disruption, if you will, is not happening, is it because the industry is too comfortable, like banking, and all of a sudden we may see all these new players, kind of high tech, new tech, appealing to younger people, or is it because it's a bit? Is it because it's a regulated industry? You can't just like enter as a new player. What do you think the reason is that we're not seeing these opportunities to be exploited?
I think historically you had a few different monopolies. The government obviously did a bit of work to try and split those up. After that, though, you've seen quite a few different retailers come in, and companies like Actu-AGL, who were in Canberra by themselves, now have this range of competitors. The problem is the majority of companies, the way they're set up, either due to regulation or due to the nature of the beast. So a lot of these companies got separated due to regulation. So the electricity has to be kept separate from the gas, has to be kept separate from the water. So you as a customer might be with the same company for all 3, but you're getting 3 different bills, and if you call them up, they've got no idea what's going on. So there's this regulation issue in there. But the other issue is the majority of these companies have all been set up around the same infrastructure with the same kind of tech and the same build. And none of that is well designed to be agile, to move around, or to focus on the customer. Everything's been focused on how a utility can serve their core purpose, and they've not had to worry about what does the customer think or care. And I think that's been the biggest issue so far.
Interesting, thank you. So what he's saying, like to sum it up, it's not an actual regulation barrier or anything. It's just that no one's actually gone into looking at it and see how they can bring it all together, probably. So it's possible, basically, to approach this problem as an outsider, outside the regulatory body. I don't know, some sort of mechanism that doesn't require any, because as you're saying, there are separate entities, but maybe there could be another layer on top of them that work with them, kind of like a proxy between the customers and them. This is what I was hearing, that there is opportunity to kind of explore. It's not an actual regulation barrier.
Definitely opportunity to explore. There is a regulatory barrier, but that regulatory barrier doesn't stop these companies from serving a customer well. That regulatory barrier might stop these companies talking between electricity, gas, and water, but it won't stop them from serving a customer better. So there's a huge range of opportunity, and we've talked about this before, to create this kind of structured middle layer where you can pull all the information in a way you need, push that out, run the analytics, and then push those solutions into the customer service areas where they can start utilizing them themselves. But if you're trying to build this solution using the current tech stacks and build it within those current tech stacks, I think you'll find 5-10 years' time, you're still not anywhere ahead where you need to be.
Yeah, I was going to add to Tasman's comment at the very end on the tech stacks. I think that utilities are, Alexa, are kind of it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? I mean, utility is utility for a reason, so they can only really change incrementally, and that is definitely a regulatory issue. And so that utilities have been adopting technology. Like I mentioned earlier, they were one of the first adopters of the Internet of Things with the digital metering some 20 years ago. But the confluence of the pandemic now and a little bit of the shakeup maybe provides an opportunity for them to reassess, starting from scratch on the tech stack and what they can accomplish. And I think, like, foundationally thinking, that is an opportunity now that they didn't maybe previously have. And that's just because they're in the race to the bottom, I guess, so to say, a little bit like Taz commented earlier as well, is a retailer is constantly only has one tool in his bag, is reactive, and it's very difficult for someone to revolutionize their product when they're in that stance. So theoretically, I would assume, if I could prognosticate a bit, that there's some retailers in this stance now who are going to take a much bigger risk, gamble to do what solutions like what we're talking about, and they'll probably come out clearly the winners on the other end of the crisis.
Yeah. The biggest opportunity for an electricity retailer at the moment is to be proactive, not reactive. It's the major thing that will set them apart from any other retailer out there.
Yep.
Any other questions there, guys? Or we're going to let you go out into the night, enjoy yourselves, or stay at home, whatever the case is these days.
Thank you, guys. That was very informative session. So that was very good, actually.
No.